The scent of blood and roses filled the most exclusive birthing suite at the Portland hospital, a strange perfume for a miracle. For 27 hours, Arabella had fought, her body a battleground to bring their son into the world. Her husband, Julian, the man whose empire spanned continents, had been a rock, whispering promises of a perfect life. But as she lay exhausted, her newborn finally resting in the crook of her arm, the door swung open. It wasn't a nurse. It was Serafina, her husband's mistress, glowing and unapologetic. And then, Julian uttered the 9 words that would shatter not just the moment, but the very foundation of Arabella's world. "Let her hold him first, darling. It's only fair." The silence in Suite 4 of the Portland hospital was a fragile, shimmering thing. It was the kind of quiet that only immense wealth could buy in the heart of bustling London. Outside, Great Portland Street hummed with the ceaseless energy of the city. But within these soundproofed, cream and gold walls, the world had been reduced to the soft, rhythmic breaths of a newborn. Arabella Devo felt as though she were floating. The past day and a half had been a brutal, primal marathon of pain and effort, a stark contrast to the 5 years of her corset, impeccably curated marriage to Julian. Now, in the aftermath, a profound, bone-deep weariness warred with a euphoric high. She looked down at the tiny, perfect creature nestled against her, his face a miniature, scrunched-up replica of her own father's. A wave of love so fierce and possessive, it was almost painful, washed over her. He was here. He was real. He was hers. "Leo," she whispered, her voice a raw and used thing. "Hello, Leo." Julian stood by the vast window overlooking Regent's Park, his silhouette sharp and imposing against the bruised twilight sky. He hadn't moved for 10 minutes, simply staring out at the city he felt he owned. At 45, Julian Devo was a man carved from ambition and success. His handsome face, which graced the covers of financial magazines with unnerving frequency, was a mask of controlled charisma. He had built his tech empire, Nexus Dynamics, from the ground up, and he managed his life with the same ruthless efficiency. Everything was an asset, an acquisition, an extension of his will, including Arabella sometimes feared his family. "He's perfect, isn't he?" Julian said, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey. He turned, a practiced, brilliant smile spreading across his face. It was his public smile, the one that charmed investors and disarmed rivals. It rarely reached his cool gray eyes. A new heir for the Devo legacy. Arabella flinched, almost imperceptibly. Legacy, heir not our son. It was always about the grand narrative for Julian, the continuation of his dynasty. For her, it was about the impossibly small fingers curled around her pinky, the downy softness of his hair against her cheek. "He has your determination," she offered, trying to bridge the emotional chasm between them. "He certainly fought his way into the world." "Of course he did. He's my son." Julian walked over to the bed, his expensive Tom Ford suit uncreased, his energy seemingly inexhaustible. He smelled of his signature cologne, a scent of sandalwood and power that clung to every room he entered. He looked at the baby, a flicker of genuine pride in his eyes, but he didn't reach for him. He reached for his phone instead. "I've had the nursery at the Belgravia house completely redone," he said, scrolling through images. "The theme is celestial navigation. Antique telescopes, a hand-painted ceiling fresco of the constellations on the night he was born. The pram you wanted, the custom Silver Cross Balmoral with the Devo crest embossed on the side, has been delivered." He was listing assets, confirming transactions. Arabella's heart, which had been soaring moments before, began a slow, heavy descent. She had wanted a simple, loving home. Julian had built a showroom. She had wanted a partner. She had acquired CEO. The physical toll of the birth was immense, but the emotional labor of her marriage was a far more draining affair. It was a constant performance, a careful dance of maintaining the perfect image he demanded. The beautiful, intelligent wife, the hostess of flawless dinner parties, the elegant accessory on his arm at endless galas. She had played the part so well that she sometimes forgot who she was without the script. But holding Leo, she felt a flicker of a forgotten self, a primal, protective instinct that had nothing to do with social standing or appearances. She thought, this is real. A soft knock at the door broke the sterile peace. Arabella expected a nurse with pain medication, or perhaps the lactation consultant Julian's assistant had booked months in advance. "Come in," Julian called out, his tone bright and welcoming. The door opened, not with a gentle swish, but with a confident, deliberate push. And in the doorway stood the one person in the world Arabella would have paid £1 billion to never see again, Serafina Knight. She was everything Arabella was not. Where Arabella was a classic English rose with her fair skin, gentle blue eyes, and ash-blonde hair, Serafina was a vibrant, exotic bloom. Her raven hair was a sleek curtain falling over the shoulders of a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin. Her lips, painted the same audacious shade of red, were curved into a smile that was both pitying and triumphant. She was a walking, breathing embodiment of every insecurity Arabella had ever harbored. Arabella's breath hitched. Her entire body went rigid, her arms tightening around the precious bundle of her son. The air in the room, once thick with the scent of new life, was suddenly choked with the acrid stench of betrayal. She looked at Julian, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading question. Was she doing here? Julian's charming smile didn't falter. If anything, it widened. He walked towards Serafina, placing a casual, proprietary hand on the small of her back. "Sarah, darling, perfect timing," he said, his voice resonating with an unnerving warmth. "Come and meet him. Come and meet the new man in our lives." Our lives? The word struck Arabella with the force of a physical blow. The pronoun was a declaration, a stake driven through the heart of her marriage in this most sacred of spaces. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty. Serafina glided into the room, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. She ignored Arabella completely, her dark, predatory eyes fixed solely on the baby. She moved with the languid grace of a panther closing in on its prey. "Oh, Julian," Serafina breathed, her voice a husky purr. "He's exquisite, absolutely breathtaking." She stopped at the foot of the bed, her gaze sweeping over Arabella's pale, exhausted face with a flicker of contempt before returning to the infant. The room had shrunk, the opulent suite suddenly a claustrophobic cage. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was a screaming void thick with unspoken rage and heartbreak. Arabella's mind raced, a chaotic jumble of denial and fury. This had to be a nightmare, a postpartum hallucination. Any moment now, she would wake up. But Julian's next words dragged her from the depths of denial and plunged her into a new, even colder circle of hell. He turned his gaze from Serafina to Arabella, his expression one of serene, unassailable authority. It was the face he used when closing a hostile takeover, the face that said, "This is happening. There is no negotiation." And then he said them, the 9 words that would detonate her world, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind. "Let her hold him first, darling. It's only fair." Time seemed to warp in the ensuing silence. The soft hum of the medical equipment, the distant wail of a city siren, the very beat of Arabella's own heart, it all faded into a dull, roaring static in her ears. Her world had compressed to a single, horrifying focal point, the smiling face of her husband and the outstretched hands of his mistress. What? The word was a guttural shard of sound torn from her throat. It was too small a word for the magnitude of the violation, a pebble thrown against a tidal wave of insanity. Julian's smile remained fixed, a mask of benevolent reason. "Serafina has been on this journey with us, Arabella. She's been a tremendous support to me, to us. It's a gesture, a way of acknowledging her part in our family's happiness." Our family. The phrase echoed in the cavern of Arabella's shock. This woman, this parasite who had fed on the decaying corpse of their marriage, was being woven into the fabric of her family's most precious moment. The journey? Arabella thought of the morning sickness that had lasted for months, the swollen ankles, the sleepless nights, the searing, tearing pain of labor. That was her journey. Serafina's journey had been conducted in boutique hotels and secret apartments, a parallel track of deceit that Julian was now attempting to merge with her own. No, the word was firmer this time. It rose from a deep, primal well of maternal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. Her arms, which had felt as weak as water just moments before, were now bands of steel around her son. Leo, oblivious, continued to sleep, his tiny mouth making suckling motions. He was her anchor in this maelstrom of madness. Absolutely not, she repeated, her voice gaining strength, each syllable a brick in a wall she was frantically building around herself and her child. She finally tore her gaze from Julian to glare at Serafina. Get out. Serafina's triumphant smirk wavered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of irritation. She looked at Julian, a silent command in her eyes. Handle her. Julian's placid demeanor began to crack. A flicker of impatience, the familiar tightening around his jaw that Arabella knew so well, signaled the end of his feigned compassion. The mask was slipping. Arabella, don't be hysterical, he said, his tone shifting from gentle persuasion to condescending command. You're emotional. Your hormones are all over the place. It's perfectly understandable, but you are not thinking clearly. Gaslighting. It was his favorite tool, the invisible scalpel he used to dissect her reality and reassemble it to his liking. He had done it for years. Her concerns about his late nights were dismissed as insecurity. Her discovery of a hotel receipt was paranoia. Her loneliness was neediness. Now, her righteous fury at this ultimate betrayal was being written off as postpartum hysteria. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 5 years, Julian, she shot back, her voice trembling but clear. And I'm telling you that this woman will not lay a finger on my son. Now, tell her to leave. Your son. Julian laughed, a short, ugly sound devoid of humor. He is my son. He is a Devo, and his arrival will be celebrated by those I choose to celebrate with. Serafina is my partner. She has been for a long time. It's time you accepted that. The word partner was another calculated cruelty. It demoted Arabella from wife to, what? The incubator? The official mother for public consumption? Serafina, seeing her opening, stepped closer to the bed. Her expensive perfume, something musky and overtly sensual, warred with the clean, antiseptic smell of the hospital. It felt like a contamination. Arabella, Serafina began, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. I know this must be difficult for you to understand, but Julian and I share something very deep. My love for him extends to all parts of his life. That now includes Leo. I want to love him, too. I want to be a part of his life. Julian wants that. Don't you want what Julian wants? It was a masterclass in manipulation, framing her intrusion as an act of love and Arabella's resistance as a selfish denial of Julian's happiness. Arabella felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it nearly lifted her from the bed. What you share is a hotel room key. The only thing you want to extend is your credit line. You will not use my child as a pawn in your sordid little affair. He is not a part of your arrangement. He is my son. Our son. Julian corrected her, his voice now dangerously low. And I am his father. My rights here are equal to yours. And right now, I am asking you, as his father, to let Serafina hold him. He was framing it as a legal right, a parental decree. The sheer audacity of it left her breathless. He was using the very concept of fatherhood which he had just sullied beyond recognition as a weapon against her. And I, as his mother, the one who carried him for 9 months, the one who just spent 27 hours giving birth to him, am telling you no, she said, her eyes locking onto his. If you force this, Julian, I swear to you, this will be the last time you ever see either of us. It was a desperate bluff, and they both knew it. Where'd she go? He controlled the finances, the houses, the staff. He had an army of lawyers who could paint her as an unstable, vindictive woman in minutes. He had built her cage so meticulously that she hadn't even realized she was trapped until this very moment. Julian's face hardened into a cold, menacing mask. "Don't threaten me, Arabella. Not now. Not here. You are embarrassing yourself." He took another step forward, his presence looming over the bed. "You will give the baby to Serafina. You will do it now. We're going to have a civilized, modern family. You will adapt, or you'll be left behind. It's that simple." He wasn't asking anymore. He was issuing a decree. He nodded at Serafina. It was the signal. With a victorious glint in her eyes, Serafina moved to the side of the bed, her perfectly manicured hands reaching down towards the sleeping infant. Her crimson nails looked like drops of blood against the pure white of the baby blanket. Arabella's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment of desecration. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She looked around the room, desperate for an Alia nurse, a doctor, anyone. The call button on the bedside table seemed a million miles away. Her mind, a whirlwind of rage and fear, snagged on one single, chilling thought. Julian had called Serafina his partner. He had spoken of her being on this journey with them. His cruelty wasn't random. It was too specific, too confident. There was a reason for this grotesque ceremony he was trying to orchestrate. There was a piece of the puzzle she was missing. And then, as Serafina's fingers were mere inches from the blanket, a memory surfaced, a conversation from months ago, dismissed at the time as another of Julian's strange, controlling quirks. It was about the IVF clinic. The most exclusive, the most expensive. "Only the best for my heir, darling. Absolute genetic perfection. I've taken care of everything personally. You don't need to worry about a thing." He had been so insistent on that specific clinic, so involved in the process more than she'd expected. A new, terrifying suspicion began to dawn, a cold, creeping horror that was even worse than infidelity. A suspicion so monstrous it couldn't possibly be true. But as she looked at Julian's cold, determined face and Serafina's proprietary smile, she knew her bluff had to become a promise. And she had to find her weapon. "Stop," Arabella said, her voice surprisingly calm, cutting through the tension. Serafina paused, her hands hovering. Julian looked at her, annoyed. "Arabella, enough of this drama." "No, this is just the beginning of the drama, Julian," she said, her eyes boring into his. She adjusted Leo slightly in her arms, holding him tighter. "You said she was on this journey with us. You said she was your partner in this. You're right. I think she was far more of a partner than I ever knew." Julian's expression flickered a hint of confusion, a touch of alarm. Arabella took a deep breath, the sterile hospital air feeling cool and sharp in her lungs. "Before you touch my son, Serafina," she said, her gaze shifting to the mistress, "perhaps you should tell me about your appointments at the Lister Fertility Clinic." The name of the clinic hung in the air like a detonation cord, instantly vaporizing the smug confidence on Serafina's face. Her crimson-lipped smile vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed, fish-like gape. Her perfectly manicured hands, which had been poised to claim her prize, flew back as if the baby blanket were electrified. Julian's reaction was even more telling. The blood drained from his face, leaving his tanned skin a sickly, ashen gray. The mask of control didn't just slip, it shattered. For a split second, Arabella saw him not as the indomitable tycoon, but as a cornered animal, raw panic flaring in his eyes. "What were you talking about?" he stammered, the smooth baritone roughened with shock. "You're delirious. The birth has made you. Don't you dare say I'm hysterical again, Julian." Arabella cut him off. Her voice was low and serrated, the fear that had paralyzed her moments ago, now crystallizing into a cold, hard diamond of fury. She had been right. The monstrous, unthinkable suspicion was true. I'm talking about the fact that the Lister Fertility Clinic, a clinic renowned for its discretion, keeps meticulous records. Records of egg donors, for instance. It's amazing what a generous contribution to their research foundation and a few quiet questions from a concerned benefactor can uncover. She was bluffing, but with the conviction of a seasoned poker player. In reality, Her suspicion had been born from a single stray comment weeks ago by Julian's perpetually flustered personal assistant, a young woman named Chloe, whom Arabella had always treated with kindness. While confirming a car service for Arabella, Chloe had nervously mentioned cross-referencing Julian's calendar to avoid a conflict, muttering something about the other A's appointment at Lister. At the time, Arabella assumed it was herself, Arabella, but Chloe's nervousness had planted a seed of doubt. Then, a week later, she'd seen a charge on a joint statement for a high-end Jewelera gift she never received purchased on the same day as one of Julian's board meetings. The pieces had been floating, disconnected. Now, in this hospital room, they slammed together with brutal clarity. Serafina looked wildly at Julian, her expression a silent, screaming plea. Do something. Fix this. But Julian was still reeling, his mind clearly racing to calculate the damage, to find a new angle, a new lie. Arabella pressed her advantage, her eyes never leaving his. You were so meticulous, weren't you? So controlling. You didn't just want an heir. You wanted a specific kind of heir, one with my breeding, my family name, my social standing, but with her genetics. You didn't think I'd be smart enough to carry your child, did you? Or perhaps you just wanted to ensure your pet project was part of the genetic makeup. A little piece of your precious partner embedded forever in the Devo line. The horror of it washed over her again, but this time it was accompanied by a strange, liberating clarity. This wasn't just about an affair. This was a conspiracy against her body, her motherhood, her identity. You used her egg, didn't you, Julian? She said, the words tasting like poison. You had my IVF cycle secretly manipulated. You let me go through the injections, the procedures, the sickness, the labor, all for a child that isn't biologically mine. You let me believe he was mine. The ultimate violation. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had turned her own body into a vessel for his deceit, making her an unwitting surrogate for her husband's mistress. Julian finally found his voice, sputtering with indignation. This is an outrageous, disgusting accusation. Serafina has never even been to that clinic. Oh, really? Arabella shifted her gaze to Serafina, who was now trembling, her bravado completely gone. That's funny, because a Miss S. Knight has a rather thick file there. Records of hormone treatments, egg retrieval procedures, all paid for by an offshore account linked to a Nexus Dynamics subsidiary. The same subsidiary, I might add, that funds your apartment in Knightsbridge and the lease on your Porsche. Serafina let out a small, strangled whimper. She was exposed. The intricate web of lies, so carefully woven, had been torn apart by a single, well-aimed thread of truth. The atmosphere in the room was now thick with the fallout. The gilded cage had become a courtroom, and Arabella was both the chief witness and the prosecutor. You wanted to create a family, Arabella continued, her voice shaking with a potent cocktail of grief and rage. A modern family, as you so charmingly put it. A family where I would be the mother in public, the socially acceptable face of the Devo dynasty. And she, Arabella jerked her chin towards the whimpering Serafina. She would be the secret biological mother, the one you truly considered your partner, the one whose son you were raising. And I would just be the incubator, the nanny with the right surname. She looked down at Leo, sleeping peacefully through the implosion of the world he had just entered. A fresh wave of love, purer and more powerful than before, surged through her. Biology didn't matter. He was the child of her body, of her pain, of her heart. He was hers in a way Julian and Serafina could never comprehend. He was not a genetic project or a social asset. He was her son. And this grotesque ceremony, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, asking her to hold him first. It wasn't a gesture. It was a ritual, a symbolic handing over. The biological mother acknowledging her offspring before the surrogate gets too attached. You wanted to establish the hierarchy from the very first moment, didn't you, Julian? You wanted to put me in my place. Julian stared at her, his face a mask of fury. The game was up, and he knew it. The charismatic veneer was gone, replaced by the cold, ruthless predator that lay beneath. You were never my equal, Arabella, he hissed, the words dripping with years of resentment. You were a transaction. Your family name saved my first company from bankruptcy. That was the deal. I gave you a life of luxury, of privilege. This baby, he was supposed to be the culmination of that deal. My lineage secure by your social standing. Serafina understood that. She understands ambition. She understands what it takes. You, with your poetry books and your charity luncheons, you were always just a stepping stone. The confession, brutal and honest, was almost a relief. The vague, creeping feeling of being used that had haunted her for years was finally given a name. Transaction. Stepping stone. Well, the transaction is hereby terminated, Arabella said, her newfound strength solidifying into resolve. And this stepping stone is about to become a millstone around your neck. She reached for the bedside call button, her fingers closing around the cool plastic. Now, for the last time, get out of my room. Both of you. Serafina didn't need to be told twice. With a final, panicked look at Julian, she practically fled, her crimson dress a smear of color as she disappeared through the door, her heels clattering in a panicked retreat. But Julian didn't move. He stood, a statue of incandescent rage, his fists clenched at his sides. You have no idea what you've just done, he snarled. You've started a war you cannot possibly win. I'm not the one who needs to win a war, Julian, Arabella said, pressing the button. A red light glowed on the wall panel, and she could hear a soft chime at the nurse's station down the hall. I just need to protect my son, and I will burn your entire empire to the ground to do it. The door opened and a matronly, no-nonsense nurse stepped inside, her eyes immediately taking in the scene. Arabella, pale but resolute, clutching her baby, Julian, vibrating with fury. Is everything all right, Mrs. Devo? The nurse asked, her professional gaze missing nothing. Arabella looked past her husband directly at the nurse, her voice steady, clear, and full of a power she never knew she had. No, she said. I'd like you to remove this man. He's trespassing. The nurse, a seasoned veteran named Mary who had seen everything from royal births to rockstar meltdowns, didn't even blink. Her gaze shifted from Arabella's steely expression to Julian's apoplectic face. She recognized the dynamic instantly. A powerful man used to getting his way, and a woman who had just reached her limit. Sir, Mary said, her voice calm, but with an underlying firmness that brooked no argument. The mother needs a rest. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is my wife. This is my son. I'm not going anywhere, Julian snarled, taking a threatening step towards the bed. Mary moved with surprising speed, positioning herself between Julian and Arabella. Sir, this is a hospital. If you don't leave peacefully, I will call security. And believe me, the press would have a field day with billionaire Julian Devo forcibly removed from maternity ward. I can see the headlines now. The mention of the press was the one weapon that could pierce Julian's armor of arrogance. His entire life was built on a carefully constructed public image. A scandal of this nature messy, domestic, and unflattering would be catastrophic. He shot Arabella a look of pure venom, a silent promise of retribution. This isn't over, he hissed, his voice low enough for only her to hear. He straightened his suit jacket, attempting to reclaim a shred of his dignity. He gave Nurse Mary a withering glare, then turned on his heel and strode out of the room, leaving a vortex of cold fury in his wake. The moment the door clicked shut, the adrenaline that had been holding Arabella together vanished, and a deep, convulsive shudder racked her body. She began to cry silent, hot tears streaming down her face, soaking the top of Leo's blanket. They weren't tears of sadness, but of shock, grief, and a terrifying, exhilarating sense of freedom. Nurse Mary was by her side instantly, her professional demeanor softening. There, love. You're safe now. You and the little one. Let all out. He wanted, Arabella stammered, unable to articulate the full scope of the horror. I heard enough, Mary said grimly, pulling a chair closer to the bed. Men like that, they think they own the world and everyone in it. You did the right thing. You were magnificent. That one word, magnificent, struck a chord deep inside Arabella. For 5 years, she had been elegant, charming, a credit to him. She had never been magnificent. The praise, coming from this kind stranger, felt more validating than any compliment Julian had ever given her. "What do I do now?" Arabella whispered, looking down at the sleeping baby. "He'll come back. He'll have his lawyers. He'll take him from me." "First things first," Mary said, her voice practical and grounding. "We make this room a fortress. No one gets in or out without your explicit permission. I'll speak to hospital security myself. We'll put a guard on this door. No visitors, no deliveries, no flowers. Nothing. Not without your say-so." Mary then handed Arabella the hospital phone. "Second, you make a call. Not to your parents, not to a friend who will just get emotional with you. You call a lawyer. The meanest, most ruthless family lawyer you can think of." The advice was sharp and clear, cutting through the fog of her emotions. Julian had started a war. It was time for her to hire a general. There was only one name that came to mind: Catherine Sterling, a notorious litigator known in London's elite circles as the Shark in Chanel. She specialized in high-stakes divorces for wealthy women, and her reputation was one of fearsome competence and zero compromise. Arabella had met her once at a charity event and had been struck by her intimidating intelligence. Julian had dismissed her as an unladylike ball breaker. He was about to find out just how right he was. While Arabella made the call, her voice gaining confidence with every word she spoke to Catherine Sterling's voicemail, Nurse Mary orchestrated the lockdown of Suite 4. Within the hour, a discreet but solidly built security guard was posted outside her door. The hospital administration, alerted to the situation involving one of their most high-profile clients, moved swiftly to ensure their own reputation wasn't tarnished. The Portland became her sanctuary and her stronghold. The siege began less than 3 hours later. It started not with a bang, but with the smooth, insidious charm Julian was famous for. A magnificent bouquet of 1,000 white roses arrived, so large it required 2 orderlies to carry it. The card, in Julian's elegant script, read, "My darling Arabella, forgive my stress." The emotion of the day was overwhelming. "I love you both. Let's talk. G." Arabella instructed the guard to send them back. Next came a parade of gifts. A velvet box from Asprey containing a diamond necklace in the shape of a celestial constellation, a nod to the nursery theme he had so proudly described. A personal shopper from Harrods calling to arrange a delivery of a complete postpartum wardrobe. A representative from a prestigious law firm, one of Julian's firms, calling to smooth things over and discuss the couple's shared assets in a civilized manner. Each attempt was rebuffed. The gifts were refused. The calls were not put through. With every deflected blow, Arabella felt a sliver of her power returning. She was no longer reacting to a script. She was writing her own. The turning point came that evening. Catherine Sterling, the Shark, arrived in person. She was a petite woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a navy Dior suit, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She listened to Arabella's entire story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Arabella finished, her voice raw, Catherine simply nodded. "Good," Catherine said, her voice crisp. "The narrative is clear. The breach of trust is absolute, and the emotional and psychological damages are egregious. The genetic manipulation is a masterstroke of cruelty and, therefore, a gift to us in legal terms." She saw no horror, only leverage. It was exactly what Arabella needed. "He will try to prove you unstable," Catherine stated, laying out the battlefield. "He will use your postpartum state against you. He will file for sole custody, claiming you are erratic and preventing a father from seeing his child. Our first move is to preempt that." Catherine's plan was swift and brilliant. She had already been busy. Before even coming to the hospital, she had filed an emergency injunction, citing Julian's threatening behavior and the extreme psychological distress he had caused. A judge, moved by the sheer audacity of the case details, had granted it. Julian was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of the hospital. "But that's a temporary measure," Catherine explained. "Our real weapon is the one he handed us, the story." She pulled out a tablet, and showed Arabella a draft of a press release. It was a work of art, a carefully worded statement detailing the unimaginable emotional distress Arabella had suffered, the shocking discovery of a profound marital betrayal, and her focus on protecting her newborn son's privacy and well-being from a toxic and manipulative environment. It didn't mention Serafina or the egg donation directly. That was the ace up their sleeve, to be played in court, not in the tabloids, but the implication was clear and devastating. Julian's power lies in his public image, Catherine said. The benevolent tech genius, the perfect family man. We're going to dismantle that, piece by piece. We are not just filing for divorce. We are filing a suit for damages that will make his shareholders' heads spin. The story of what he did in this room will be far more damaging to Nexus Dynamics stock price than any market fluctuation. For the first time, Arabella understood the nature of the war Julian had started. He fought with money and intimidation. She was about to fight with the one thing he couldn't control, the truth. As if on cue, Arabella's personal phone, which had been silent for hours, buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. You have no idea who you're dealing with. He will destroy you. Walk away now with a settlement or you will lose everything, including the boy. This is your only warning. Arabella showed the message to Catherine. The lawyer smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. Serafina, Catherine deduced instantly. Desperate. She's realizing that her meal ticket is in jeopardy and that she could be named in a lawsuit that would ruin her. She's no longer a partner in his victory. She's a co-conspirator in his crime. She's weak. We can use her. The text was not a threat. It was a sign of fear. They were already winning. Arabella looked down at Leo, who was awake now, his dark, curious eyes staring up at her. Whose eyes were they? Serafina's? It didn't matter. He was her son. She had fought for him to enter this world. And now, she would fight for the world he would grow up in a world free from his father's corrosive influence. She took a deep breath. The gilded cage was gone. She was standing in the ruins, but she was standing, and she was ready to fight back. Release the statement, Arabella said to Catherine, her voice clear and strong. Let's begin. The statement hit the financial world like a lightning strike. Catherine Sterling, with surgical precision, had eschewed the grubby world of the tabloids. Instead, she granted the exclusive to the Financial Times, a decision that immediately elevated the narrative from a salacious domestic dispute to a grave matter of corporate governance and executive temperament. The headline, printed in the paper's sober, authoritative font, was a masterpiece of devastating understatement. Questions over Nexus Dynamics CEO's judgment amidst acrimonious marital split. The article itself was a beautifully crafted instrument of destruction. It spoke of a pattern of erratic behavior and extreme lapses in personal judgment by Julian Devo, which had argued raised serious concerns for shareholders. It quoted several senior sources within Nexus, all meticulously curated by Catherine's firm, who expressed deep disquiet over the CEO's increasingly volatile management style. The piece concluded by noting that in the modern market, a CEO's personal integrity was an inseparable component of brand value. From her sealed sanctuary in Suite 4, Arabella watched the fallout on a 24-hour news channel. The Nexus Dynamics stock ticker, usually a triumphant pillar of green, was hemorrhaging red. The graph showed a precipitous plunge billions in vaporized market capitalization. The board of directors, a grim pantheon of industrial titans, were reportedly in an emergency meeting. Julian's carefully constructed mythology of the infallible visionary was cracking under the strain. Julian, predictable as a wounded predator, did not take it lying down. His counterattack was swift and brutish. The next morning, every major tabloid screamed, headlines plastered over a grainy, unflattering photograph of Arabella from years ago. Billionaire's wife in postpartum psychosis. Hubby's tough love sparks vicious lies. The articles were a barrage of character assassination, painting her as a fragile, jealous, and unstable woman. They even dredged up her family's history, twisting a distant relative's battle with depression into a narrative of genetic instability. His lawyers filed a motion demanding an emergency psychiatric evaluation and temporary sole custody of Leo, arguing she was a danger to her child. Attached was a sworn affidavit from Serafina Knight, a work of pure malicious fiction, styling herself as a compassionate family friend who had witnessed Arabella's unhinged and frighteningly violent behavior. For a terrifying moment, Arabella's resolve wavered. "This is the standard playbook for a cornered narcissist," Catherine Sterling's voice said over the phone, a calm, steady anchor. "He attacks the victim's credibility because he has no defense for his own actions. We have hospital records. We have Nurse Mary's detailed notes. We have Serafina's threatening text. Let him scream in the playground of the press. We will win in the courtroom." While Julian fought his war in public, Catherine waged hers in the shadows. She dispatched a legendary private investigator, a former MI6 agent named Finch, to dig into Serafina Knight's life. The breakthrough came a week later. Finch's report was an explosive device. Serafina's real name was Sofia Nowak, a Polish national with a history of targeting wealthy, married men. But that wasn't the bomb. The bomb was that Sofia had a sister, Dr. Elise Nowak, a senior embryologist who, until 2 months ago, had been employed by the Lister Fertility Clinic. "Checkmate," Catherine said, a rare, triumphant smile touching her lips as she presented the folder to Arabella. This wasn't just Julian's monstrous plan. This was a premeditated conspiracy between all three of them. "This is no longer a messy divorce, Arabella. This is criminal fraud." Armed with this irrefutable proof, Catherine didn't go to the press. She arranged a meeting with the chairman of the board of Nexus Dynamics, Sir Marcus Thorne. In a private suite at Claridge's Hotel, she laid out the evidence: the financial trail, the employment records, Nurse Mary's testimony, and a framework for a criminal investigation that would obliterate the company's reputation. Sir Marcus, a man who had watched his company's stock plummet, was above all else a pragmatist. He saw an unacceptable, catastrophic level of risk. In that moment, Julian Devo ceased to be an asset. He had become a terminal liability. The day after that meeting, the war ended. An official press release, stark and cold, announced Julian Devo was taking an indefinite and immediate leave of absence. It was a corporate execution. That same afternoon, Catherine received a call from Julian's lead lawyer. The tone was no longer aggressive. It was pleading. They wanted to settle. In the profound quiet of her hospital suite, Arabella held Leo close. She had not just survived the storm. She had become the storm. 2 days later, she checked out of Portland. A discreet car bypassed the waiting paparazzi and drove her not to the cold, cavernous mansion in Belgravia, but to a quiet, elegant Muse house in South Kensington, leased in her own name. It was smaller, cozier, and filled with bright afternoon light. There was no celestial-themed nursery, just a simple wooden crib, a comfortable rocking chair, and the overwhelming, beautiful presence of her son. It was a home, not a showroom. As she stepped over the threshold, her own key in her hand, her phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. He promised me everything. I lost it all. My sister is gone. He won't help her. Don't let him near the boy, ever. He will poison him." It was from Serafina, a pathetic admission of defeat from the woman who had conspired to steal her life. Arabella looked at the message, at the confession and the warning. She felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no triumph. Just a quiet finality. She deleted the message without a reply, her attention already back on the future, sleeping soundly in her arms. 1 year later, the sun streamed into the living room of the Muse house, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The lingering scent of coffee mixed with the sweet, clean smell of baby powder. Leo, now a giggling, happy toddler with a full head of dark hair and his mother's bright blue eyes, pushed a wooden block tower over for the 5th time, shrieking with delight. Arabella laughed, scooping him into her arms. She wasn't the elegant accessory anymore, clad in a simple cashmere sweater and jeans, her hair tied loosely back. The ghosts of Julian and Serafina had long since faded, becoming footnotes in a life that was now vibrantly, authentically her own. The settlement had been more than generous, But her real wealth was here, in this room, in the sound of her son's laughter. She was no longer Arabella Devo, the transaction. She was Arabella, the mother. And in the quiet, sunlit world she had built from the ashes, she was finally home. What a journey. Arabella's story is a powerful testament to the ferocious, unyielding power of a mother's love. She walked into that hospital a wife, cocooned in a gilded cage, and walked out a warrior, having brought an empire to its knees to protect her child. What did you think of Arabella's incredible fight for justice? Was Julian's downfall deserved, or was he simply a product of a world that enabled his cruelty? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of resilience and revenge, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a dramatic tale. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next gripping story we have in store for you.